After 20 years of silence, Michael Jordan knocked on one door he never thought he'd see again. This wasn't a stadium. There were no cameras. Behind that door was the woman who believed in him before the fame, before the championships. But what Michael found inside that house stopped him cold. Old letters, medical bills, and a truth that changed how he saw his entire legacy. This is the story they never showed you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now let's dive into what really happened. And no one ever expects the past to knock on their door, but sometimes when you least expect it, it arrives quietly and changes everything. It was a calm autumn afternoon, the kind where the air feels still and time seems to slow down. In a small, peaceful town far away from flashing cameras, packed arenas, and roaring crowds, a black SUV rolled to a stop in front of an old, modest house. The paint on the walls was slightly faded. The porch had seen better days. This place held no signs of fame or fortune, only memories. The man who stepped out of the vehicle was known across the world. His name was spoken with respect, admiration, and awe. But here, in this quiet neighborhood, he was just another visitor. Michael Jordan. At 60 years old, Michael had achieved everything most people could only dream of. Championships, wealth, global recognition, a legacy written in history. Yet, despite all of it, something had been missing. For months, a familiar name had echoed in his thoughts, one he hadn't said out loud in more than 20 years. Sarah. She was part of his life long before the world knew who he was. Before the trophies. Before the pressure. Before greatness became his identity. Back then, Michael was simply a young man chasing a dream that felt almost impossible. And Sarah was the one who stood beside him when that dream felt fragile. She believed when others doubted. She stayed when the future was uncertain. But life changed. Ambition grew. Expectations became heavy. And slowly, without anger or arguments, they drifted apart. There was no final goodbye. No closure. Just silence. Now, after 2 decades, Michael stood in front of her door. His heart was heavy. His hands slightly tense. For the first time in years, the legend felt unsure. He raised his hand to knock, completely unprepared for what awaited him on the other side. 20 years earlier, Sarah had been more than just a girlfriend. She was Michael's piece in a world that demanded everything from him. When his life was uncertain and his future unclear, she was the calm place he returned to after long days of training and doubt. While Michael pushed his body to its limits, chasing a dream few believed in, Sarah worked 2 jobs to support herself and help cover everyday expenses. She never complained. She believed in hard work and in him. She sat in nearly empty arenas, cheering from the stands when the seats around her were vacant and the crowd was silent. Back then, there were no cameras following Michael, no reporters asking questions. Just a young man with a big dream, and a woman who believed in that dream more than anyone else. But everything changed when success arrived. Michael's talent exploded onto the national stage. His schedule became relentless. Flights replaced quiet dinners. Hotels replaced home. Cameras followed him everywhere, turning his private life into public property. The pressure grew heavier each day, and without realizing it, Michael began to disappear from the relationship, not only physically, but emotionally. Phone calls became shorter. Promises were delayed. Important moments were missed. Then one day, Michael left for another season on the road and never came back to her. There was no argument, no betrayal, no dramatic ending, just silence. Sarah never demanded answers. She never asked for money or attention. She never contacted the media or shared their story. Instead, she quietly stepped out of his life, carrying her memories with dignity. Years passed. Championships were won. Records were broken. Michael Jordan became a global icon. Yet, in quiet moments, away from the spotlight, a single question often returned to his mind. What happened to the woman who knew me before the world did? That unanswered question finally led him back. When the door slowly opened, Michael barely recognized the woman standing in front of him. Time had clearly left its mark. Sarah looked older, thinner, and worn by years of quiet struggle. Yet, when their eyes met, he saw something familiar. Her eyes were the same as he remembered.
Calm, kind,
Strong. For a moment, she froze, as if her mind needed time to catch up with reality. "Michael?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Inside the house, it felt as if time had stopped completely. The room was small and modest. The furniture was old, carefully kept but clearly worn. The walls were plain, with no decorations or signs of comfort. This was not a life filled with luxury or ease. On a small table near the window lay neatly stacked medical bills and several prescription bottles. Michael's heart sank. Sarah invited him in with a polite smile. Her voice remained steady, but her hands shook slightly as she poured him a glass of water. That's when she finally shared the truth she had carried alone for years.
She had been sick for a long time.
A chronic illness had slowly drained both her savings and her strength. Hospital visits became routine. Medical bills replaced dreams. She never married, never had children. Life had not been kind, but she never allowed bitterness to take over. "I heard about you," she said softly, lowering her eyes. "You did everything you said you would." Michael tried to respond, but no words came. His chest felt tight. Then came the moment that shattered him completely. Sarah opened a drawer and carefully pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside were old newspaper clippings, faded ticket stubs, and handwritten letters. Every major moment of Michael's career, preserved with care. She had followed his journey from a distance. Quietly.
Proudly.
Without ever asking for anything. "I never stopped believing in you," she said. In that instant, the legend broke, and only the man remained. After all these years, Michael finally found the courage to ask the question that had haunted him for 2 decades. His voice was quiet, almost fragile, but filled with the weight of years of regret. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" he asked. Sarah looked at him and smiled gently, a mix of warmth, sadness, and understanding in her eyes. "Because you were chasing greatness," she said softly. "And I didn't want to be a distraction." The words hit Michael harder than any opponent ever had on the basketball court. For the first time in his life, the man known worldwide for his strength, his confidence, and his dominance felt small, vulnerable, human. Tears welled up in his eyes. He swallowed hard, the weight of lost years pressing down on him. He wanted to explain. He wanted to justify. But no explanation could erase the silence, the absence, or the moments he had missed. He apologized, not as a global icon, not as a billionaire, not as a legend whose name was etched in history, but as a man who had once loved and failed. For hours, they sat together, talking quietly, about dreams and ambitions, about the pain of separation, about choices they could never undo, about the life that had moved on while they had carried memories alone. The conversation was raw, emotional, and deeply human. A moment that neither time nor fame could replicate. Before leaving, Michael quietly made a decision. Without cameras, without headlines, without anyone knowing, he paid off her medical bills. He arranged for the best doctors and ensured that Sarah would never have to struggle again. But more than anything, he promised something money could never buy. Looking into her eyes, he said, with quiet certainty, "I won't disappear again." For the first time in 20 years, Michael felt complete, not because of trophies, but because of love, understanding, and the courage to make things right. Michael Jordan left that modest house a changed man. The world didn't know. There were no cameras, no social media posts, no interviews, and no headlines announcing what had just happened. Yet, those who knew him well could sense the difference. Something inside him had shifted. He slowed down, not in his achievements, but in how he approached life. He began reaching out to old friends, people he hadn't spoken to in years. He called those he had lost touch with. He showed up, not for the public, not for recognition, but simply because it mattered. The visit reminded him of a powerful truth, one that no championship, no record, and no fortune could teach. Success can build statues, but love builds meaning. Achievements may be remembered in history books, but human connections, the moments of care, empathy, and understanding, leave an imprint on the heart. Sarah never sought credit. She never told her story to the world. She didn't want fame or attention. She quietly carried her love, her belief, and her struggles through the years, a silent witness to the rise of a legend. Yet, in that quiet town, she found peace, knowing that her love and faith had endured. And Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time, a man whose name had become synonymous with greatness, learned something more important than any trophy. Some of life's most meaningful victories don't happen on courts or in stadiums. They happen when you confront the past, acknowledge your mistakes, and choose to do better. He realized that legacy is not just what the world sees. It is how you make others feel, the lives you touch, and the love you honor. That quiet afternoon, in a modest home far from the bright lights, Michael Jordan gained a legacy that no award or record could ever equal.